I can't seem to shake this horrible feeling. It's like a sixth sense going off, leaving me in a constant state of anxiety-ridden fear. It's been weeks of this. I've tried to rationalize what's happening the best I can, but for the life of me, I can't find a logical explanation. I'm just looking for some advice now. Finn and I have been together for a little over 2 years, mostly through long distance while I'm finishing my degree. Things have been wonderful, and I've experienced some of my happiest moments, at least up until a few weeks ago when it started. It wasn't until my first night back at his place over the summer that I noticed anything. We must have dozed off around midnight. I remember jolting awake to 2:57 a.m., flashing on the screen of Finn's alarm clock. I couldn't tell you what woke me, but whatever it was stayed quiet enough for Finn to stay soundly asleep. I felt a shiver go down my spine and that horrible, anxious sixth sense sounding alarms in my head. Given the placement of Finn's bed, I had a clear view of his bedroom, bathroom, and closet door, which all sat against the same wall. Through the darkness, my eyes darted from corner to corner, but I didn't see anything unusual. I just couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. After a few more seconds of investigating, it hit me. His bedroom door sat against the wall, wide open. We weren't the type of people to sleep with our bedroom doors open, and over the years, I'd even picked up the habit of locking mine before bed, and I could have sworn I did the same to his. My heart sank to my stomach as my eyes adjusted to the darkness. A figure loomed in the doorway, staring back at me. I guess I assumed someone broke in, I don't know. Whatever it was stood quietly, watching me as I frantically fumbled around the sheets with my hand, searching to shake Finn awake. He took a step closer. He stirred. He took a step closer, towering above the doorframe. Keeping my eyes on the figure, I aggressively shook Finn's shoulder. "Finn!" I hissed under my breath, petrified tears forming in my eyes. "Finn, there's someone here." With my other hand, I felt along the nightstand until I came upon my phone. He asked, "What?" rubbing his eyes awake. Another step closer, looking at me. Finn nudged my face towards him and wiped my tear-stained cheek. "What's going on, babe?" he said. I pressed my home button, hoping to call 911, but the screen stayed black. "There's someone in the room," I whispered hysterically, hitting my phone in a poor attempt to make it turn on. Using his phone, Finn turned on his flashlight and moved the light around the room. "Nobody's here, babe," he said. Looking up from my phone's black screen, I made the same discovery. Sure enough, the room was empty and the bedroom door soundly shut. After explaining what I'd seen, Finn argued that I woke up from a bad dream. That nothing was there, and with the alarm system, nothing would have gotten in. I forced him to search the house, gluing myself to him as we walked down the stairs with an old bat in hand. He didn't find anything and didn't believe me, but I know what I saw. Since then, I haven't been back for other than a dinner date, and even that night, I knew something was wrong. I've slept at my mom's ever since. I told Finn I missed my family, even though the reality was being too afraid to sleep at his place again. We FaceTime every night as a habit. Being long distance is anything but easy, so we've tried to make the distance less noticeable, like sleeping on FaceTime or talking throughout the day. 2 nights ago, he said he'd be up late with the guys and didn't want to bother waking me up, so I went to bed without calling. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to my phone ringing and Finn's contact picture lighting up the screen. "Hello?" I answered the FaceTime groggily. I answered. It was dark and silent. "Finn, are you there?" I asked again. No response. "I thought you weren't calling tonight, silly. Guess you missed me too much," I joked. The call ended. After a few minutes of feeling really weird and honestly concerned, I called back. It took a few rings for him to finally answer, and when he did, he sounded like he'd been asleep for hours. "Hey, is everything okay?" he asked. I furrowed my brows. Yeah? Everything is fine. I was just calling you back. Did your phone die? What are you talking about? You just called me. Just didn't talk or anything. Maybe you fell asleep after you dialed? There was a pause. I didn't call you, babe. I've been asleep for like an hour. His screen paused as he clicked out of the call. No outgoing call to you. Maybe you were dreaming. Alarm bells went off in my head. Maybe. Just feels a little weird. Listen, I have to be up in a few hours. I know you've been on edge lately, but please put this behind you. You're just under stress, he said. I love you. Please get your mind off of whatever you thought you saw. I nodded and asked him to stay on the phone until he left for work in the morning. I don't like feeling crazy or experiencing horrible anxiety without a cause. I understand the I saw something in the middle of the night bit is easily dismissible, but the feeling I'm having isn't. I've always felt like women have a special sense for danger. It's knowing when to walk a little quicker to your car on a late night or grouping yourself with other women at a bar. It's knowing you aren't safe in your environment. Last night threw me over the edge, and I haven't let Finn back in his apartment. We FaceTimed as usual and fell asleep after some sitcom watching. I woke up to rustling on the phone, which is usually muted to spare me from his snoring. I checked the clock to see if it was time for him to go to work. 2:57 a.m. I watched the screen looking for Finn. It was clear the phone was moving in the dark, seeing the ceiling move from the dim glow of the window. Finn? I called out. It stopped. Babe? I asked again. It started again, this time passing his ceiling fan again. There was a soft thud against his nightstand, and I now looked at what seemed to be an upward-facing view of his bedside lamp. Hey, what's going on? At this point, my heart was racing. There was a muffled groan and movement from what sounded like bedsheets. Babe, I said firmly. What's wrong? He groaned sleepily. I explained to him what I'd seen and asked if everything was okay. He assured me he'd been asleep and didn't know what I was talking about. Finn, please check your bedroom. After some more pressuring, he gave in and checked his closet, bathroom, and remainder of his apartment with the phone in his hand. He said, I told you it was nothing. Someone was in your bedroom. Someone unmuted the phone and was walking around your bedroom. I responded. I finally convinced him to come over, and I haven't let him go back since. Even though he had his apartment searched by a couple friends who came back with the same verdict he'd expected. Empty. I've read stories of strangers living in people's attics and have been scared that someone has been watching him. I've heard of people being toyed with like they're some kind of prey before something horrible happens. I don't believe this is all in my head, and tonight verified it. It's 3:16 a.m., and Finn is beside me, fast asleep in my own bed, in my own home. His phone is charging on the bedside table, and I'm looking at its blank screen right now. So, if Finn is fast asleep beside me and not at home anymore, why did I just receive a FaceTime from his contact? Why was it another blank screen moving around his bedroom? I'm not sure what's going on. I feel like I'm living in a Black Mirror episode. And I'm too afraid to sleep. Go ahead, make this post. Nobody will help you. Okay, well, let me convince myself of that on my own, okay? This is Reddit, after all. Do you know that we raised over $80,000 overnight? We diagnosed testicular cancer on a dude once using nothing but a positive pregnancy test for Pete's sake. I believe in my Reddit folks. I don't know why I'm writing this, to be honest. I suppose that... I think you can read this right now. Whoever you is, besides a massive psychopath. Also, it is kind of comforting to be writing now. Helps with this borderline crippling headache. It also distracts me from having to think about how I ended up in this tiny room. So, hey there, people. I'm just gonna address you directly. You. You reading this right now in this moment of time. I kind of need help right now. But why would they get you to help me? Let me introduce myself. My name is Hannah Trustin. I'm 23 years old. I study literature in Boston, and I just woke up in a little room with nothing in it but a phone, the one I'm writing on. And I'm really scared. I have no idea how I got here, who wrote the title on this post, and where exactly in the world I am. I got excited there for a moment. The little spark of hope that came up was crushed right away. Of course the GPS doesn't work. Why would it? I'm probably in some underground bunker right now inside the life's work of some crazy apocalypse prepper who's probably watching me somewhere in a disgusting surveillance room, getting off on the thought of a girl being helpless and going insane. I know you can read this right now, and I'm telling you, you made one big mistake. You shouldn't have given me a phone with internet access. I've searched this tiny room for hours. Or at least what felt like hours. No signal anywhere. I held the phone to every corner, every slit, and every crack in this concrete hellhole. Nothing. Not a single bar of Wi-Fi. Gosh, that's the most millennial thing to say, isn't it? They say hope dies last. And my hope is on life support right now. Like my grandma when the cancer spread to her lungs. I'll never forget the horrible sounds of that ventilator. I'm digressing right now, but that's okay. Without internet, this is no longer my call for help. This is my memorial. The thing they'll read at my funeral. These are the last thoughts of Hannah Trustin, unfiltered and taken straight from a phone found by her body. I just had the shock of my life. Something in the ceiling opened, and a box came down. Made almost entirely of glass or something similar, but the box is not the interesting part. It's about what's in it. The reason I just screamed the soul out of my body for 15 minutes straight. Not because it's horrifying or anything, but because I had a realization. I am nothing but an object of temporary pleasure. A toy. Like one of those you'd buy in a Happy Meal as a kid. The ones you would play with for an hour, only to discard them when they're no longer fun. A Wi-Fi router. The thing in the box is a Wi-Fi router. Someone is playing a game. And I'm the protagonist. I don't even want to attempt to open that stupid box because that's what he or her, for what I know, wants me to do. But I gotta, right? I mean, that's my last chance of getting out. I will at least inspect it real quick. Be right back. Okay, so this thing is close tighter than my jeans after a barbecue with my family, first of all. Second of all, the router is turned off. But there seems to be a cable going from the router itself up the little pole from which the box is hanging and into the ceiling. So in theory, as long as this thing is connected to an outlet up there, all I need to do is hit the power button. This, of course, is a goal as far away as... I don't even have the energy to think of crappy comparisons anymore. The headache has lessened a bit, but it still hops into foreground every now and then, like right now. This is a bad wave. I'll have to look at the box again. I will get out of here. I need to. Typing hurts now. I've ripped several fingernails clean off. could have sworn I made progress there at the end. A tiny little slit where the lid starts seemed to get wider, but maybe I'm just gonna go insane. I probably am. So now I'm looking at this torture device in the box, as it looks back at me, taunting me. After further inspection, I discovered a little hole in the lid, and it leads into a portion of the box that's not glass. I need something long to stick into the hole. Nothing works! Absolutely nothing! I'm losing my mind! Hairpin? Too short. Shoelaces? No chance. I even tried sticking my finger in it. The hole is obviously too narrow for it to work, but I tried it anyway. Although the length would be ideal. The headache is back at a nuclear bomb level. I'm stuck in a constant cycle of crying, screaming, and headache. The headache worsens the crying worsens the headache. I feel like I'm going to explode from the inside. My family will have to scrape my remains off of these walls, and if I get lucky, they might find a bone or two to make a nice little necklace out of. Bone. A material that is long, robust, and thin. Exactly what the hole in the box requires. Oh my god, what am I about to do? Hello. Speech to text. Are you working? Test, test, Hannah, test, 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 test. It's Hannah with an H, you idiot phone! Anyways, whatever happens in these next minutes, I want it recorded. Something else to focus on. My finger already tastes like blood, so at least I won't notice when I actually get in deep enough with my teeth. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Oh my god, that was bad. I can't think about the next one. I have to go again, straight away. Finger in position, bite down and... Oh, please help me. I can't do this. I don't want to do this, please. Okay, counting. Oh, keep me focused. Okay, right now, number 2. Here we go. 3. Ouch. Oh. 4. Oh god, I can't do this. Gotta get through this. 5, 6, 7, 8. Starting to see some progress now. That's at least 4 layers of skin gone. 9, 10, 11, 12, 48. Bone. Nothing but bone. Oh my god. I'm so dizzy. I'm so dizzy right now. Come on. Please work. Please. Fit in the hole now. Please. Clicking noises. This is good. This is amazing. Yes. Open sesame! Oh my god, it worked. Oh, please turn on now. Please turn on. Please turn on. Router, please. Yes. Oh, this can't be true right now. This is sure too good to be true. Come on. Password? They stand on the router normally, don't they? Yeah. Down here. 2R5D6DFW04F. Connected. Now please, Reddit, please. If I've ever needed you, it's right now. Help me, please. My name is Hannah Trustin. I'm 23, and I need your help. Please. I'm going to hit post now. I saw him again this evening. His unmistakable shadow. It's been 3 days. I thought perhaps he gave up and moved on to torment others. I wanted to report him, but he hadn't actively done anything wrong. Yet. I wish I had never tried online dating. At the time, it just seemed so much easier to chat to people in my PJs with a cup of hot chocolate and not waste the time, energy, or the makeup. If only I had known. The winter darkness had set in. The unsettling stillness followed closely. The streetlights were ablaze. They had been for hours. Their fiery glow could only stretch so far, leaving increments of darkness outside their reach. I could picture him snaking between them, mocking me with his closeness. Dread shivered down my spine like an ice-cold claw beneath my skin. I leapt to my feet at a glimpse of every shadow, be it a stray leaf blowing in the cold breeze or a woman venturing out on a late-night walk with her dog. I cursed her stupidity. Does she not understand the dangers? Is she truly so blissfully unaware of what might lie in wait between the halos of light? Her dog let out a booming bark. I launched to my feet yet again and stared out the window, my heart pounding with fear, wondering what they had seen. The woman pulled her hood tighter around her face, shielding herself from the accelerating winds. "Sorry," I heard her shout into the night. Who was she talking to? Did she see someone I couldn't? Or had he slithered out of sight already? Adam could move like an assassin, silent but deadly. I dropped back down to the edge of my bed, wishing Ella would hurry home. My sister would calm me down, convince me that I was safe. He wouldn't risk her seeing him. He only showed the true extent of himself to me. What a privilege. A thud echoed downstairs and my eyes widened in instant panic. I told Ella to make sure every door was locked before she headed to town. I pictured the kitchen. Ella always leaves the window open after dinner to freshen the room up again. I bet she didn't close it before she left. She'd laugh if she heard me ponder whether a grown man who I went on a single date with might have climbed into her tiny kitchen window, but she didn't know him like I did. Another noise floated up the stairs, the sweeping sound of someone brushing along the coats that hung in the stairwell. I knew then, without a doubt, that I was no longer alone in the house. My legs almost buckled beneath me as I rose to my feet. My heart thudded so loudly in my chest I thought it might reach the open door before I did. I finally slid out onto the landing in the darkness of the hallway. If Adam could lurk in the shadows, then so would I. The stairs creaked, the person's movements silent otherwise. I pushed myself so close to the wall, I may well have turned the same painted shade of mushroom white, although my panic had surely deprived my cheeks of all color. Adam emerged from the stairwell, finally. It seems he had discovered where I lived, like I knew he would. My heart went from a hammering beat to all stopping completely. His heavy black coat glistened with raindrops. He must have been outside for hours. Why? He glided into the office across from me, delicately hovering over my work as he read through my open diary. He moved slowly, eerily reminiscent of a snake hunting down its prey. His shoes were the same leather loafers he wore to our date. They had chunky soles. I couldn't understand why they touched the floor so soundlessly. A hint of green caught my eye. A stray vine stuck to his back. He must have been in our garden. I took the opportunity to cross the stairs, trying to move as quickly and quietly as possible while fear filled my overstimulated ears. My woolen socks slipped on the second step and I crashed down to the third, fourth, fifth. I fell in a heap at the bottom. The landing creaked. I could feel Adam looking down at me now. I forced myself to look back, fighting against every grain of fear embedded in my body like static surrounding a balloon. He stood towering atop the stairs, his hands tucked casually in his pockets. He looked at me with affectionate amusement, the way you would an ever-clumsy friend. Light from the arched window on the front door crossed to the stairs, glinting in his sparkling eyes. He looked pleased, excited even. "Allie, do you need some help?" He offered me his hand. The stretched shadow behind him doubled and tripled until the outline plastered on the walls around it. A squeal escaped my lips. I slapped a hand over my mouth. Don't show fear. I pushed myself up, my ankle throbbing from my fall. The hallway floor, made of varnished wood, didn't allow my thick socks much traction, but I did my best. My legs supported me with fear alone, abusing the fight-or-flight instinct. I darted around the corner, hearing his steps right on my heel. He followed me casually, wordlessly. His silent amusement was even worse than his taunting words. The second corner was not as kind. I slipped at the door and plummeted across the tiled kitchen, slamming into the cupboards. I watched the garden light flash brightly and shatter within its plastic covers. I felt Adam come to a stop behind me. I glanced over my shoulder. Adam was watching me with pity from the kitchen door. I pushed myself further away from him, but my hip throbbed in its socket, making me cry out in pain. I tried to get back up, but my elbow wouldn't allow it. I must have smacked it as well. He drifted closer and stopped again, about a foot away, out of my reach. I could do nothing as he adjusted the legs on his trousers and squatted to the floor. Allie, you're hurting yourself. Let me get you some ice and we can go for a drive. We need to talk properly, face to face. I tried once more to scramble away, but my bruised body resisted. My fear took over, and in an instant I could no longer fight. I could hardly find the will to breathe. I bowed my head and leaned against the wall, realizing there's nothing more I could do. The hallway light illuminated the sight of his sunken face in the dark kitchen. All I wanted is to be back at the dinner table with my sister when I was safe. He considered me for a moment, leaning down to eye level. He crouched on the balls of his feet, but he supported himself on his arms. They arched outward sickeningly. I found myself wondering if his elbows would simply snap, but his subtle grin showed no sign of discomfort. His hot breath grazed my nose, and his green eyes pierced into mine. I studied them, realizing abruptly that his pupils were just slits in the glowing green abyss. My heart raced again as my stomach lurched. I had never felt such terror before. He leaned closer, his neck bending like it was made out of rubber. I tried to wiggle back closer to the wall, as far away from Adam as his invading glare could reach. A car engine rumbled to a stop outside. He heard it too, and his eyes widened. I forced a triumphant smile through my pain and fear. Ella's home. As the keys jingled outside, he slinked over to the ajar window. With a final glance and a disappointed shrug, he crawled out the window like an insect escaping capture. Revolting. Ella pushed the door open and sauntered in proudly, her arms filled with movie-watching treats. Our dog, Cooper, danced at her feet, delighted after his trip in the car. She gasped when she spotted me bundled on the floor, bruised, tearful, and trembling. What happened? She darted over, tripping on Cooper, who desperately tried to lick my face as the petrified tears turned to those of relief and helped me slowly to my feet. I told her the story while Cooper cuddled close. We agreed that this time we would have to get someone to help. I opened a new tab on my phone and searched plane tickets to LA. It was time to get away. The date had gone better than I could have expected. So well, in fact, that we made our way up to my hotel room, and I battled against my own principles. I knew it wasn't smart to invite Isaac in, but gosh, a part of me really wanted to do it anyway. A very specific part, actually. As I attempted to remind myself that coffee never just meant coffee, his deep, husky voice bounced around the close walls of the elevator like a warm blanket, tugging me closer and pushing my sense of reason out into the void. Okay, I never did anything for myself. I was never spontaneous. Perhaps this time... My sister's sarcastic laughter echoed in my ears, and I stifled an eye roll. I was in enough trouble, as it were. The last date I had gone on should be enough to deter me from spontaneity for life. Adam, aka the date from hell, had followed me around, uninvited, since our first and last date. Only fleeing to LA for a week had saved me from his stalking habit, which he did not list as any of his hobbies on the dating site. Though, thanks to my great escape, I had met Isaac at the airport. Ah, romance. Isaac's voice dropped to a whisper as we wandered down the hall, not wanting to wake any of the sleeping residents of the hotel at such a late hour. His consideration for others threw my resolve into question again. Wow, it really was the bare minimum for me, wasn't it? We stopped at my door, and he did not so much as look at it. He was a gentleman, bless him. I'll see you soon, he breathed. His brown eyes searched mine for evidence of agreement. I nodded, and he shyly grinned. Good night. He placed a kiss on my cheek, and quickly making up my mind, I turned my head ever so slightly to meet his lips. I sighed internally. Nope. I had to be smart. I had to stick to my newfound principles. I had learned my lesson. I bid him good night, hoping my regret didn't show on my face the way it turned a hole in my chest. Stupid, stupid principles. The room was strangely cold as I rested my back against the closed door. The sudden darkness, compared to the warm bath of golden light that had filled the hallway, made my hair stand on edge. I scanned the wall blindly to find the light switch, pressing it down as my stomach filled strangely with dread. The overhead flashed on, lighting the room for a split second before cutting out with an echoing crack. My stomach lurched as my eyes processed the brief glimpse in the moments after the darkness flooded it again. Bodies. So many bodies. They lined behind the almost sheer red curtains that covered the ceiling-to-floor window of the opposing side of the room. I blinked rapidly, trying to grow accustomed to the blackness and regain some elements of sight. Little dots of light from the city below finally outlined his figure. The sharp slant of his drooping shoulders was unmistakable. It was as if he filled the far side of the room with copies of himself. Adam, my voice was a quiet whisper of fear, a creak into the darkness. Did he follow me all the way to LA? Dread formed a lump in my throat as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. My hand searched for the door handle behind me, but I faced steadily outwards, determined not to look away from the nightmare facing me. There was no handle to the grip, no way to escape the horrifying scene, nothing but the smooth, cold finish of the woods stretching across my escape. I wondered if I was imagining it all for a moment. Door handles just don't vanish, but with the pounding heartbeat I felt in my chest was far too real. The light bulb flashed once again and subsequently exploded into sharp floating pieces of hot glass. I dropped to the floor, covering myself with the purse still clutched in my hands. The round head of the shapes tilted ever so slightly upwards, gazing at where the light bulb would be with curiosity. They moved as one, not a beat behind each other, resembling a person standing alongside endless mirrors, though each form appeared as real as the next. I shuffled forward, hoping to reach the phone and call for help, the sharp pieces of glass stabbing into my toes as my strappy heels did little to protect my skin. The wall guarded me from the one side as I crawled, straining my ears to try and track any other movement. The wall guided me from one side as I crawled, straining my ears to try and track any other movement. The bed blocked my view of figures, the dozens of copies of Adam's body. I could only see their heads as they turned in unison to watch me. I lunged for the phone, the adrenaline getting overwhelming, and wrapped my hands around it desperately. A yelp escaped my lips as the skin of my palm melted against the boiled plastic. I ripped it back instinctively, a move I regretted once my burnt flesh was revealed to the freezing air. I screamed, falling to my knees. The glass ripped at my skin, but the pain was numbed by my terror building in every thumping beat of my heart. I looked at the figures, wondering if my ribs would simply crack from the pressure. They lifted their heads, their shoulders and torso bouncing as though they were walking, but they didn't grow closer. I watched, helpless and terrified. They stretched out their hand, bending downwards as though inspecting something. Their other hands snaked behind their back, grasping for something I couldn't see. They straightened abruptly with confidence, excitement even. In a blink, a featureless body was in front of me, the other still mirroring it in the corner of my vision. I watched the figure's blurred hand as it moved in front of me, and it appeared to grip something tightly. The hand flew at my face, forcing me to duck instinctively. My fight-or-flight instincts kicked in and settled firmly on fright. I was frozen with horror and anticipating the painful blow of a weapon, but I felt nothing from the shadowy being. No stabbing pain in my skin or hot blood trickling down my face. My body was cold and numb with fear as it had when I had first seen Adam's figure. I sensed movement from the line of figures and glanced back, terrified that more of them would attack. I knew my escape options were non-existent. The dread built with every breath I took. Strangely, they seemed to be retreating. Their bodies jolted with motion as they appeared to run into the distance. As I watched, their shadowy outline became paler and paler until I was simply looking at some flowing curtains and beads of light from beyond. I closed my eyes, begging my heart to slow before it burst through my ribcage. The sun rose slower than it ever had before. I cowered in the corner until the room was finally filled with its harsh light. I surveyed the glossy hardwood floors. They lay smoothly, innocently. I darted to check the phone and then the door handle, and they both sat, mockingly normal. My hands cramped with pain and my feet still stabbed with shards of glass, though, even as I examined them. The wounds faded to scars. Droplets of blood that covered the floor turned into burns of steam and vanished in front of my eyes. I didn't pause to think. I leapt to where my suitcase perched and tossed any loose clothing into its depths, zipping it up faster than I had moved in years. I flung the door open and jumped into the elevator before I heard it swing closed behind me. "Good morning, madame. How was your stay?" asked the receptionist once I emerged onto the ground floor. "The bill has already been paid by a gentleman last night." I waved away at her pleasantries and her words without question, hobbling to the tall glass doors of freedom. I didn't care to ask which of the men had paid for my stay. I was too afraid to answer. "Oh, be careful, miss!" Her sweet voice floated after me as I whipped the door open. "The street to your left has been closed off. There was an incident last night." The smell of burning filled my nose and mouth. It was overwhelming, like I had been doused with diesel and lit with a flame myself. I wanted to flinch away from it, but I would have preferred to drop dead and return to the lobby of the hotel. I hobbled down the street on my high heels, my suitcase rolling behind me like a weight I was forced to bear. There was an explosive under his vehicle, which they think was triggered when he opened the car door, though he suffered multiple stab wounds to the neck afterwards. Onlookers huddled together outside a thin yellow line of police tape and exchanged information they had overheard as I weaved between bodies in the street. I kept walking, refusing to turn and examine the source of the billowing smoke that followed me. It wasn't until later that day I discovered my date from the previous night. Isaac was dead. I felt, in the most bizarre way, like I had been there when he was killed. As if I shared his last moments, like they were my own. It gets very dark very early this time of year this far north. By 4 p.m., the sun is already set, and dusk is upon us. Definitely not the ideal conditions for a girl who looks as young as I do to be walking home alone. The route that I'd chosen from the junior high school to the house was particularly off the beaten track and took me through several tranquil and deserted areas of town. No parent with even a shred of love in their heart for their child would allow them to make this walk at any time of year, let alone in the depths of winter. It was just after I'd passed the cemetery and was about to turn onto the path through the woods that I became aware of his presence. At this point, he was what you would consider a safe distance behind me. I didn't want to turn around and look at him directly. Still, I could tell from the heavy footfall of his steps and the excited nature of his breathing that he was about 30 or 40 feet away. There were no other people around, and this road was a dead end with no houses on it, meaning that the chances of someone driving by were minimal. I was acutely aware that it was just him and me. Despite many thoughts running through my mind at the moment, one above all was controlling me. If this situation is going to go down the way I think it will, I need to make a move right now. I started to increase my pace, not so much that it would be immediately apparent, but enough that I would significantly increase the distance between him and me. Unless, that is, he really was following me and altered his speed to keep up. Sure enough, within a couple of seconds, I sensed him breaking into a slow jog in order to catch up and close the distance between us. Okay, Carmilla, time to make a choice. Do I run, or do I turn and confront this man? I was right at the head of the woodland park at this point, so I decided to turn around. Hello, mister. Can I help you with something? Are you lost? I detected the slightest hint of surprise that I acted in this way. Still, he quickly regained his composure and continued his slow approach.
Hey there, kiddo. I was just out here looking for my dog. I think he went into these woods. Do you want to help me find him?
He was smiling at me now. What's your dog's name? I asked.
What?
Your dog's name. What is it? If I'm going to help you find him, I need to shout his name.
Yeah. His name is Fred.
Was he surprised by my question, or had he hesitated because he needed to make up a name? Well, I'm kind of scared of dogs. I think I'm just gonna go home. Sorry, I can't help you.
Can I at least walk you home? Which way you headed? It's dark out here and not safe for little girls like you.
He was edging ever closer to me now and had a big, creepy smile plastered across his face. Oh, I live just on the other side of the woods. Trust me, I can make it just fine.
I'd still like to walk with you if that's okay. I mean, I'm sure my dog is in there somewhere.
His icy blue eyes were laser focused on mine now. It almost felt like he was trying to hypnotically control me with his gaze. If you really think Fido is in there, I guess you should go look for him.
Fido is a crazy old mutt,
he said.
I'm sure I will find him in there.
Okay, there is no dog. This man definitely means trouble. Time to take action. I turned and started running into the woods. While I had a couple of seconds head start on him, the fact is that the body of a 13-year-old girl can't run as fast as a fully grown man. He caught up with me ridiculously fast, so quickly, in fact, that we were still within the view of the road. The street lamp gave off enough light for us to be seen by a passerby if one were to approach.
What did you run off for?
He asked.
I'm not gonna hurt you.
Sorry, mister. I just got scared at the thought of your dog running around in here. I got bitten by something pretty nasty when I was younger, and the thought of it happening again really freaks me out.
Okay, I understand. Let's keep walking, and I'll keep you safe from any stray dogs. Hey, are you hungry? I have some food I could share with you. Let's find a nice place and sit down to eat.
What do you have? I was kind of hungry as it happened.
Delicious homemade spaghetti and bolognese sauce. Let's go a bit further into the woods and then I'll share it with you.
He didn't have a bag with him, and there's no way he was hiding some container full of food in his pockets. This was bullcrap. No thanks, mister. My elders say I'm allergic to garlic, so I shouldn't eat Italian food.
Okay then, let's just keep walking.
His heart rate was increasing, and the adrenaline was kicking in. I could smell the excitement oozing from his pores.
Here, let me hold your hand. You will be safer that way.
He didn't wait for me to respond, grabbing my hand in his clammy grip. He was a strong one, it was apparent. There's no way a regular girl of my height and frame would be able to escape him. We walked on and were soon far away from any streetlight and any semblance of safety. Soon, things are going to take a turn very much for the worse. He clearly sensed this too, letting go of my hand and standing in front of me to block the path. The disingenuous smile had gone now.
Okay, little lady, fun time is over. Well, for you anyway. My fun is just about to begin.
He withdrew a set of handcuffs from his pocket and dangled them in front of my face. I seriously doubt that, Johnny. This was the part that I always loved the most. The look of utter shock on their faces when I first called them by their name. I'd seen it dozens of times before, and it never grew old. Now for the next part, he'll be rocked back for a few seconds before trying to reassert his authority.
Wait, what? How did you know?
I didn't let him finish his question. Johnny Mutton, pedophile, rapist, and child killer. We've been tracking you for a while. He looked so stupid, still dangling those cuffs in front of him. Guess what? We found you. Just watching the cogs of a regular human's brain slowly turn wasn't my favorite part of the whole game, though. Come on, work it out already. Then you can pretend it doesn't matter. You're the boss here, and that we can get down to business.
Well, I don't care what you think you know.
Oh good, the bravado had returned. It was always more fun when they still thought they had the upper hand.
I'm still gonna leave little pieces of you scattered all around this forest.
Again, with the dangling handcuffs. What was wrong with him? Okay, which hand should we start with? You want my left? The schmuck had a look on his face like it was Christmas and his birthday all rolled into one. He advanced and roughly placed the handcuff around my left wrist.
Things are gonna get real ugly now, little lady.
He was smirking. He genuinely believed he was still in control. At least we can agree on something. Okay, let's get this over with. I was going to make this quick. He wasn't even worth toying with. I grabbed the other end of the handcuffs and clasped it around his wrist. There was no way he was going to escape me now.
What are you doing, kid? You think that's...
I jumped up and sank my fangs deep into his neck. I would feast on him later, but for now, ripping out half of his jugular would lead to a suitably painful death. I climbed off of him and spat out the chunk of flesh onto the ground in front of him. In his shocked state, he actually bent down and tried to pick it up, as though that would fix his lethal wounds. But I wasn't about to allow him that tiny crumb of false hope, though, so I dragged him away into the middle of the clearing. Any last words, Johnny? This was a little cruel of me, what with the fact that he was choking to death on his own blood. I didn't have much sympathy, though. He let out a pathetic gurgling sound, looking up at me pleadingly. Sorry, I didn't catch that. He was as white as a sheet now, and not long for this world. Time to monologue. You guys just don't put in the effort anymore. I mean, for Pete's sake, I only got into town last night. I was obviously indisposed during the daylight hours, meaning I know you had zero time to prep this. I remember the old days when creepy men like you would at least put in the effort. You know, a couple of weeks of following your victim, regular drive-bys, watching the home through binoculars, learning the names of friends. But you just spotted me and decided there and then to act on your impulses. Pathetic. It didn't even occur to you how dumb it would be for a girl to be walking through the woods on her own? It took me less than 2 minutes to lure you in here. His breathing was extremely labored now. He had moments left. Okay, fair enough. Nobody expects one of our kind to look the way I do. But hey, like I said, you should have put in the legwork. Goodbye, Johnny. And with that, I decided to feast. It always tastes better when they're still alive. Even if only just. I never should have replied. Even before I knew it, I wasn't comfortable. I should have just blocked him and tried to move on. To prevent myself from being identified through this story, I will not be using any real names, usernames, or even websites. I'll have to be vague. I also created a new Reddit account just so I could even say this, so please forgive my caution. I was on my computer one night, multiple tabs open, so many websites. I was having another depressive episode, and tonight was one of the worst ones. I felt... well, if you have depression, you know what it feels like. Like nothing. It's not the absence of feeling, it's the feeling of absence. Like it's all being sucked out of you. In any case, I was typing up a post online, talking about how I felt invisible. As I've been getting older, it felt like more and more people ignored me. Like it wouldn't have mattered if I just stopped existing. I've been feeling as though every part of me is just useless and there's nothing I can do to get better. I poured my empty heart out onto this post, hoping I could get all the negativity out of my brain before bed. Afterward, I cried myself to sleep. I woke up the next day feeling better? That's not the right word. Less awful. I didn't feel good. I just felt less bad. So I took my meds, went to work as usual, ran some errands, came home, played video games before heading to my bedroom with my laptop. I opened up some of those websites, clicking through things, looking at posts from friends and such, skimming the content. When I opened the website I posted on the night prior, I had a notification. Someone commented on my post. It was an odd comment, very simple and kind. They said how they empathized and hope I get better. But in addition to this, they messaged me directly. They told me they were studying psychology and that they believed they knew how to help me. For some reason, they also told me their name. Frank. He offered to talk about how I felt on Discord or Skype, saying he doesn't like to give people advice on a website comment. I sorta got what he meant. It can be hard to capture tone and meaning in text, but it felt weird. I didn't really want to just interact with some anonymous stranger on the internet, but it seemed he was nice. I looked at his account to see that he comments on a lot of similar posts, and they all were posts about depression and negative thoughts, so it started to feel like this guy was genuine. I gave him my Discord because I didn't really want to show him my face. He responded very quickly, even though I was only just responding to him. We set up a time to talk, where we used voice chat. He was very nice and sounded like he really understood what I was saying. It felt like someone wanted to hear the things I had to say and actually have a conversation about it. We started having multiple sessions. I would joke that they were amateur therapy sessions I should probably be paying him for, but he wasn't interested in money. Eventually, he asked again if we could use Skype. In the back of my head, I wasn't really comfortable with it, but it started to feel like he was just another internet friend, so I didn't mind so much. I said yes, and we set up a time to do a video call. This was ultimately the worst decision I've ever made in my life. The video chat was relaxed. He looked different than I had pictured. I'm a bit of a nerd, so when I think of Frank, I think Frank Castle from Marvel Comics. His real name was comparable to a Marvel character. I'm just using a different example. So when I saw him, he looked more like Reed Richards. Frank seemed much more organized than I thought. He'd actually been taking notes, apparently, and had been genuinely giving thought to my problems I was working on with him. So during our Skype, we would sometimes be typing down things we talk about and reference what he typed. It felt so great. Like someone actually could see me. After our Skype call, I started to feel better than ever before. It felt like I could get through a day without my meds. A couple days later, I asked if we could do another call, but he told me he needed to go on a trip and couldn't bring his laptop with him. He told me I'd be fine, that I'm doing great, and if I ever need him, I can text him on Discord, since he still has his phone. This was alright with me. I mean, as great as this was, I only met him a few weeks ago, so I was able to go on about my routine like normal. But over time, I felt my mind descend again. Like all the work we did was going to waste. It felt like the very fact that I was getting depressed again was only depressing me more. I tried to text Frank, but he was always busy. A month had now passed since I posted that depression post. I was just lying in bed on one of my days off, not feeling bad, but not feeling good either. By the logic of my condition, I suppose you could say it was a good day, in that I had the energy to get up, walk around, and eat food, but still. And then I heard some noise outside. It sounded like some people arguing. I find people watching entertaining, so I took a peek outside my window, trying to be discreet so nobody caught me peeking. The lights were off in my house, all the curtains were drawn, and there was still some daylight left, so peeking through the less than half a centimeter wide hole in my curtain was safe. I was right. 2 people standing outside their cars were arguing over probably nothing. One of them was my neighbor, and the other looked like her sister. But the one thing that caught my eye was the man walking by them on the sidewalk across the street. A man who looked a lot like Reed Richards. It was weird. Maybe it wasn't him, but it looked so close. I could have sworn Frank was walking by my house. He was looking at his phone, then looking up at houses, as if he was comparing. I was about to go outside when he looked over at my house. I stopped, dead in my tracks, peering through the tiny eye hole in my curtain. It was odd. Part of me was concerned, part of me was confused, and a part of me just wanted to go out and ask why he was here. In any case, it took me a moment for the dread to kick in. How did he find where I live? Why did he lie about where he was going? I heard knocking at the door. No voice, just soft, polite knocking. I didn't know what to do. I was still so confused, so I pretended I wasn't home. He went away after about 10 minutes. I was expecting him to text me, but he didn't. It all felt so weird. Fortunately, all the curtains were drawn in my house, so I could feel safe opening my laptop without giving away I was home. I did some poking around on my online profiles, first looking at the ones I knew he had. Nothing. No reason, nor obvious method he could have used to track me. Until I went to one of my social media accounts, which had pictures of me. A picture of my house when I moved. But why would Frank do this? He didn't seem like a stalker. I was still so confused. I kept wanting to text someone, but Frank was the only person I'd talked to in the past month. Nobody else in my life ever listens to me anyway. All my friends are surface level at best. All my family seemed beyond the empty nest feeling. And all my coworkers knew me as the quiet one. It was only him. Only Frank. I went back to my post from a month ago, and I reread our first conversation. I went to go find his profile again and looked closer at all the posts he commented on. 12 comments on 12 posts, each 2 months apart. Every single one of those posts had users with deleted accounts. Except one. Me. Each time, he commented nicely on their post, and within the next 2 months, they had deleted their account. That was it. You couldn't tell who these accounts were because once they were deleted, everything except what they posted was gone. It's as if they just stopped existing. I thought the feeling of dread I had couldn't get any worse until I heard weird clicking noises at the back door. Someone was breaking in. I freaked out, closed my laptop, and went inside the closet to hide. It was roomy enough to sit down, but it was pitch black. It had gotten dark outside at this point. Sooner than I expected, the intruder had opened the door. It was hard to hear, but from what I could tell, he didn't know I was home. I heard him lock the door behind him, walk around softly as if checking if anyone was here. I couldn't breathe. I was in total shock, every ounce of my body trying to not make a noise. From what I could tell, he eventually sounded satisfied with the emptiness of the house, and it sounded like he set something metal on the kitchen table and a bag onto the floor. I heard the sounds of him taking things out of his bag and what sounded like tape being used. After he was done, he walked up by the closet I was in. Stopped for an amount of time I'm sure my overtly distressed mind could not accurately recount for you. And kept walking. After a few moments, I heard him open my laptop and sit down. I couldn't tell he opened the laptop until I heard clicking and typing from my keyboard again. Again, I couldn't have known it was my laptop at the time, but I did a little bit later. Finally, thinking rationally, I quietly looked for my phone and remembered I had left it in the living room, right by my laptop. Setting aside the lack thereof ability to call the police and the fact that my phone was being guarded by my intruder, it also provided another detrimental source of tension. If you knew me, you would know that I'm a very methodical person, and even during major depressive episodes, I never fail to leave the house without my keys, wallet, and phone. Which means you have to know me to know I'm not a forgetful person, and realize that I'm probably still home. You'd have to know me like Frank knows me. After a few minutes, the typing sound stopped. I felt like he was looking right at me even if he didn't see me. I heard him walk up near the closet again, my heart thumping. He moved very quietly, but I heard him go and pick whatever metal object he set on the kitchen table, and then slowly walk up the stairs. I knew this was my only chance. I slowly creaked open the door, looking toward the living room. My phone was still there, right next to my laptop. In a state of panic, I booked it towards my phone and ran out the door for my life. I didn't even look behind me. I just kept sprinting, frantically dialing 911. I eventually stopped at a Subway and told the responder as much of the relevant immediate information as I could. There was someone in my house, I think, trying to kill me, and I'm hiding at a public establishment. Eventually, a police car came and brought me to my house. The door was still wide open for me running, and I was worried that the police wouldn't believe me. But the other officers already at my house confirmed. There was a kill room set up, with garbage bags taped up all over the floor of my kitchen. The officer joked that it looked like someone watched Dexter and tried to do the same thing at a lower budget. But I was far beyond the ability to laugh about this. They let me look inside to confirm, but told me not to touch anything. After a bit, I answered all their questions, but all I could give them was a description. I didn't know anything about him, except his name was Frank. I told them about the deleted profiles, and when they didn't understand, I tried to log into that same website. But I wasn't able to log in. And it took me a moment to realize when he was on my laptop, he was deleting my profile. I even checked Discord to see if I could show any other conversations, but he deleted those too. From my end, all of my login information is saved on my laptop, so he could have easily tampered with all the accounts. I couldn't contact Frank, not only because he deleted all of my accounts with conversations with him, but also because he deleted all of his accounts, rendering him untraceable. I've since then moved to a different state, of course. Fresh start. I won't say where, for obvious reasons. But I've tried to heal from all of this. I'm more cautious on the internet now. Simple common sense things, upping the privacy settings on my profiles, that sort of thing. I've spent a lot of time unraveling everything he did on my laptop, and I like to think I've been able to put it past me since that happened a year ago. Until I found a folder today on my laptop. I swear, wasn't there before. It just had a saved PDF inside, with 3 words in small, responsible text. I see you. The following story is My Date Took Me to a Theater Performance and I'm Petrified from the Experience by Lilac Vortex. I met Artem on a dating app. He was so charming on our first date at the cute cafe near my work. I was instantly attracted to his dark hair, broad shoulders, and intense brown eyes. He was such a gentleman, and he kept me intrigued with the stories of his thrill adventures, including bungee jumping in Asia and safari trekking in Africa. Our second date was a walk through the park with coffees last Sunday afternoon. He told me all about his work as a teacher and how he enjoyed living in the city after growing up in a smaller country. Our conversations flowed so naturally, and I was excited to spend more time with him. When he texted me after our second date to go to a theater performance late tonight, I was so excited. Most guys are always planning dates at a bar. A theater performance felt so sophisticated. Artem was different. He was artsy and adventurous. He texted, "I'll pick you up at 7 p.m. I can't wait for you to experience this. You will love the show." This is what I really liked about Artem. He was always so direct and clear. 7 p.m. came and he was parked right outside the door. "We have to get tickets from the seller first. It's very hard to get tickets for these types of shows. It won't be long. It's on the way to the theater," he explained as I hopped into the car and he started driving. "I've never heard of the Rhino Theater before. Is it new?" I asked. "No, it's super old. It's usually an older crowd, but I enjoy the art so much. I like going to lesser-known spots. It's more my vibe." How was Artem so cool? I couldn't stop smiling thinking about how thrilling my life was going to be dating him. Maybe our next date I could finally introduce him to my friends. They would be so intrigued by his charm. We pulled up into a quiet neighborhood with a few houses on the block. The roads were dark now, but one streetlight was on, flickering at the end of the road. We pulled up and I saw a tall, lanky guy with his hood on, standing under the light. Artem pulled up near to the guy and parked the car. The light kept flickering and the radio started to turn static. Artem turned it off and his eyes focused in on the clock. "There's the guy. 7:18 right now. I have to wait till 7:20 to meet him." I laughed. I didn't know you were into superstitions. "He's very particular on these tickets. They're very rare, you see." So mysterious. I'm excited. I went to turn the radio on again, but Artem swatted away my hand. "No music, he will hear. He enjoys the quiet." I looked to the guy standing outside and noticed he hadn't moved this whole time, his face still hidden under his large hood. "Ah, there it is, 7:20. I'll be right back, my dear," Artem said as he kissed me on the cheek and hopped out the door. I watched him as he walked up to the guy. I couldn't see him anymore as Artem was blocking him from my view. I saw the two of them stand there and didn't notice any movement. After a few seconds, Artem turned around and headed back to the car. It was strange as the guy stood there not moving. "Got the tickets." He flashed the two shiny ticket stubs with a large grin on his face and began to drive away. "What did the guy say?" I barely saw him move. It's such a strange place to sell tickets, don't you think? I asked. "Well, just because you didn't see him move doesn't mean it didn't happen." Artem laughed. "You're so funny. How could you see in this dark anyways?" "Oh, and he reminded me, don't get the popcorn today. It's Tuesday." "Popcorn isn't good on Tuesdays?" You ask a lot of questions, don't you? This will be a fun time. He smiled at me and kept driving. We finally got to the spot. The area looked abandoned with no buildings, but the theater, which was a warehouse with no windows and with a few cars parked outside of it. We parked near the other cars and walked up to what looked like the back entrance with light coming out of the doorway. This does really look off the beaten path. I do like these hipster-type places. Well, you were really in for a treat. Artem held my hand as we walked up the doorway and he knocked 3 times, each knock with a few second pause in between. An older gentleman opened the doors and I saw the bright lights and colorful red walls in the lobby inside. Artem handed the gentleman our tickets and we walked inside. The carpet was so soft and the lobby was filled with pictures of theater performances. Right in front of us was the concession stand that was filled with a variety of different candy and popcorn all along the wall. This place looked so magical. "Let's get some snacks first. The theater is to our left. We have a few minutes and we definitely can't be late," Artem said. There was no one else around, so we walked up to the concession stand and got served right away. The server behind the counter had a really nice red suit uniform on. I saw his gold-plated name tag. "Hi, Alec. What's the best thing you have here?" I asked. "Ah, a newbie. You are definitely in for a treat. I would recommend everything, but if you have a sweet tooth, this chocolate is great." I looked over at Artem to see if he approved. "Whatever you want. That looks great." "Okay, we'll take the chocolate. And how about popcorn?" I asked. Are you sure?" Alex said, looking over to Adam, whose smile had faded from his face. "Just the chocolate is good. We don't want to cause a disturbance with popcorn munching," Artem said as he paid for the chocolate snacks. "I guess we follow silly rules," I jokingly say to Artem, but his serious look didn't change. "This chocolate will be great. Let's get to our seats. Artem took my hand and we walked to the large, heavy theater doors. A little push and the doors flew open, revealing a large opera-style theater with hundreds of seats. The theater had so many people sitting inside, I was shocked as the parking lot was fairly empty. The majority of the front was packed. Most people looked excited and quietly whispered while waiting for the performance to start. Artem and I sat near the back, having lots of space to ourselves as the back wasn't as packed as the front. In front of us, I saw a very old couple sitting a few seats down from us. They must have been in their late 60s and were dressed very nicely, the lady wearing a nice brown shawl around her and the man wearing a tweed blazer. Everyone looked so sophisticated in this theater. You comfy? I'm so excited for you to experience this. I come every week, Artem said gleefully. Yeah, very comfy and ready for the show. Also, you come every week? Doesn't it get boring? Nah, there's always something different each time. The actors really make the show. It's about to start now. The lights in the theater started dimming and the stage curtains opened. On the stage, a few younger actors around our age walked out, looking a bit petrified in the stage lights blinding them. They slowly walked around the stage looking at the audience. Their faces looked pale and nervous. I looked over at Artem and he looked like a kid at a candy store, the biggest smile on his face. Oh, look, there's Claire. I dated her. She looks good in that outfit. What? He whispered to me as a girl walked slowly onto the stage. The actors started looking at each other and then one finally spoke. It sounded like Shakespeare. I couldn't understand what they were saying. All the actors were using soft voices and generally looked confused and nervous. After 20 minutes of them walking around and random props coming onto the set, finally the curtains closed and the lights turned on a bit, indicating an intermission? What was that? I couldn't really understand it. Are they amateurs? I whispered. Artem laughed. Don't worry, you'll start to understand it over time. They all do. I glanced around the audience and noticed everyone was still. Maybe the intermission was very quick? I looked over and noticed the older couple that was sitting close to us. The woman had turned her head and was staring directly at me. After she saw me notice her, she turned away. This theater was starting to get very creepy. I took out my phone to look at it, and Artem quickly patted me. No need to check your phone, dear. It's a date. Also, there's no self-service here anyways. I'm gonna go quickly to the bathroom, I said, putting my phone away. Okay, be quick. The show will start soon. It's right inside the lobby. I got up and walked towards the lobby, and everyone in the theater was still sitting in their seats, creeping me out even more. How are they enjoying this performance? I got into the bathroom and checked my phone. Still no service. Must be a dead zone area. After a few moments, I heard the bathroom door creak open and turn around. The old lady who was sitting in front of us was standing in the doorway looking at me. Hi. Enjoying the show? I asked, trying to make small talk. She stared back at me and didn't say a word. She walked up to the sink and didn't turn it on, now just staring at the mirror. What is this place? I was hoping she would tell me something. She turned around and looked at me. I could now see her eyes. They were such a deep, dark black. She continued to stare at me and then just walked back out the bathroom door. I felt a cold shiver run through my body. This creepy place was starting to really scare me. Where had Artem brought me? Why was this old lady staring at me? I started to think if I should just call an Uber and get out of here. I didn't know if I was being crazy. Sure, it was a weird performance, but Artem had been fun. I didn't want to ruin it with one bad date. Maybe everything was just in my mind and I needed to relax. This was probably a different type of sophisticated art I wasn't used to. I walked back into the lobby. No one around still. I checked my phone again. Still no reception. I started walking to the concession to talk to the guy from earlier. Maybe he could tell me more about this place. Alec was there standing behind the counter, but I noticed his body was frozen. Exactly like a statue, not even blinking. How can this be? I thought. I had just spoken to him before the show started. I walked up to the door to the entrance of the place, hoping I could get some reception outside. I needed to Google this place and learn more about it, and also tell my friends my location. This date was not going how I thought. This place was truly strange, and how could Alec be frozen still now? This wasn't just in my head now. The doorman was no longer at the door entrance. I tried pushing it open, but the door wouldn't budge. He must have locked it. I started to panic as I was getting scared now. What have I gotten myself into? This is becoming so sketchy, I thought. I didn't know what to do other than playing it cool with Artems. I had to get out of there safely. I walked back into the theater and closely looked at the audience. I started to notice they were statues too. No one was moving or blinking. I hurried to my seat and sat next to Artem, trying not to show him my panic. He was looking so giddy still. I was hoping this would all be over soon and I could be home safe at my place. What took you so long? The show's about to start again. How was he having so much fun with this? He was not the guy I had imagined. I was just reapplying my makeup. What do you want to do after this? I was hoping he wouldn't notice my sweat and keep things normal with talking about afterwards from this place. Artem just laughed. Getting a little bit ahead, aren't you? Just enjoy the second half. You'll begin to love it. They all do eventually. I looked over at the couple who was sitting near us. The lady was back in her seat, and they didn't move at all. I wondered if they were statues too. The lights dimmed again and the actors came back onto the stage. I started to think if they were being forced to perform. It would explain their terror and fright on stage. The actors again spoke cryptic lines and walked about the stage. I couldn't focus. My mind was running through endless possibilities. I started beating myself up for not paying attention on how we drove here. Even if I could get outside, I had no clue where we were. Everything was so deserted. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, the show ended. The actors took a bow on stage and stood as the curtains closed in front of them. I heard clapping, but looked closely and noticed the audience members weren't moving. Artem was clapping furiously, so I joined in to fit in with him and play along, hoping this date would end soon. Wasn't that exhilarating? That last actress, she's Emma, I know her too. This was her first show. She did fantastic. Yeah, she was great. I tried to say with some enthusiasm. You look tired, let's get you home. You'll need a lot of rest. We walked into the lobby and I saw the front entrance door was propped open. I felt a sigh of relief. I could finally get outside away from this place. We got into the car and Artem drove me home. He couldn't stop talking the whole drive about the show and the people he knew and the lines they said. My mind just focused on getting home. Here we are. I hope you had a good night. I'll text you later. Bye, I said as I ran out his car as quickly as I could. I am never going to see that guy again. That was definitely the creepiest thing I have ever experienced or even heard of. I got inside and got ready for bed. I texted my friend chat saying I have to call them tomorrow and tell them all about this creepiest date ever. Everyone was asleep, so I didn't get a reaction from them yet. I noticed the light from the street glaring into my room as I was about to go to sleep. As I went to close the blinds, I looked outside and noticed someone standing under the streetlight across the street from my place. It was very late now and unusual for someone to be outside, so I looked closer. My body went numb as I noticed the person was the old lady from the theater. She was still wearing that brown shawl and staring directly at me. I jumped and quickly closed the blinds and hopped into bed. How did she know where I lived? My body was starting to sweat, but I just told myself it was all in my imagination as I laid in the fetal position under my covers. Just as I closed my eyes, my phone dinged. I opened it, and it was a text from Artem. I hope you were paying attention to the show. You'll have to memorize those lines sooner or later. The show must go on.
Thank you for watching this video. Big shout out to my patrons, Leaf Ninja, Roy Larimer, Mr. Creepypasta, Nicole Kister, Neon Scoundrel, William Delphin, and So Much Heresy. If you want to become a patron, buy merch, or join my Discord server, be sure to check out the links in the description. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.
You'll be sitting here, Miss Marilyn.
He sat me down on a hard wooden chair facing a mahogany table draped in a red tablecloth. Placed atop the tablecloth were 10 lit candles. 9 of the candles were arranged in a circle, with the 10th placed in the middle. Across from me was another empty chair. A thick, black curtain was strung up behind the table. Presumably, the 10 strangers I would be dating were standing behind it. The email had come to me at a bad time in my life. I had just divorced my husband and spent most of my savings buying a new home 500 miles away in the city. I was struggling to find a job and was extremely in debt. So when I was offered $5,000 to take part in a social experiment, I was ecstatic. $5,000 was more than enough money to pay off my debts until I could find a suitable job. The event was hosted by a so-called virtual media company and was intended to display the psychological differences between the two sexes. The whole speed date was supposed to be filmed and released to the public via their many social media outlets. I didn't have a problem with being on camera, especially since I was being paid so much. In retrospect, I should have been more suspicious about the whole thing. How was this company, which I'd never heard of, able to pay $5,000 to some random person with no credentials to sit down and talk with some guys for a few hours? Anyways, the director, who introduced himself as Mr. Monroe, told me that there were 3 rounds, and for each of the rounds I would speak to each of the men for a set amount of time. After I had spoken with all of them, I would have to eliminate some of them until I was left with one man who I would go out with the next weekend. The shoot seemed legitimate. A professional makeup crew had dolled me up, and the studio was jam-packed with expensive-looking equipment and lighting. About 25 people were milling about behind the set, setting up the cameras and making sure everything was ready. After about an hour, everything was set up and we were rolling. I was asked to introduce myself to the camera, which I did, reading off of the cue cards one of the crew members was holding up in the back. We only had to do one take of the introduction before the first guy was brought out. The first round was simply titled Introductions. I had 5 minutes to speak with each of the contestants. All I needed to do was ask them some basic questions about their lives. The first man stepped out from behind the curtain. He was pretty average looking, with long blonde hair and a wispy goatee on his chin. He was wearing khakis and a golf shirt. He approached slowly. I noticed as he walked that he had a limp. I didn't think much of it and immediately began talking to him as he sat down across from me. "So, what's your name?" I asked. There wasn't a script for this part of the video, but I figured I could just ask the same questions to each of these guys.
My name is Ian.
He seemed to be staring off into space.
Yeah, Ian.
"Oh, where are you from?" I asked. Ian didn't respond. He just kept staring towards something in the back of the room. I repeated the question. "Where are you from?" Ian snapped out of his trance and quickly answered.
I'm from Vancouver.
"Oh, interesting. Did you fly all the way down here?"
No, I moved here a few weeks ago. Nice town. Nice town.
There was definitely something off about Ian. At first I assumed he was stoned, but as I looked into his eyes, I realized something. He was scared. The look in his eyes was that of true primal fear. Maybe he has social anxiety, I thought. I continued on. The rest of the interview went similarly. I asked him about his job, his family, and his hobbies. He answered every question in the same elusive manner, only giving me brief answers and staring off into space most of the time. After the 5 minutes was up, the next man stepped out and Ian was ushered away behind the curtain. This man was a little more open. He introduced himself as Casper and said he had lived here his whole life. Though he was definitely an improvement over Ian, he still seemed somewhat on edge, refusing to tell me about his job or family. After Casper was Jonathan, who was the first one to ask me any questions. He was also more open about his past, but when I asked him why he was here as part of the speed date, he quickly changed the subject. I thought it was a little odd, but I chose to ignore it. It went on like this for about an hour, asking each of the men questions. Some of them were open about their lives, some of them outright refused to talk about certain things. I figured that it was all normal and that some of them were just nervous. Finally, we made it to the final contender. He looked as if he hadn't shaved in months, and his clothes were dirty and torn. I was already planning to eliminate him when he sat down. Before I was able to speak, he said loudly,
"My name is Mason."
A little taken aback, I began to speak, but he cut me off. Mason lowered his voice down to a whisper.
"You need to get out of here."
I almost asked him what he meant, but the look in his eyes told me that I was not to acknowledge his comment. After that, we had a normal discussion, and at the end of our time, he stood up and walked away. As he made his way to the black curtain, he looked behind me and shot me a knowing glance. Now it was time for the elimination. I had to select 4 men who would no longer be part of the competition. The producers gave me 5 minutes to deliberate on who I would remove. I really considered eliminating Ian, but I don't know, I couldn't bring myself to do it. He seemed so scared, so pitiful, and I felt guilty removing him. I also thought about removing Mason, but his strange behavior intrigued me. I wasn't sure if he was crazy or just trying to scare me, but I couldn't let him go just yet. Eventually, I picked out the 4 unlucky guys. Among them were Casper. I'll admit there was no real reason for eliminating him. He just unnerved me a little. The other 3 were either just too unexciting or made me feel uncomfortable. After I had listed the names of the eliminated participants out loud, a staff member escorted them away and out a small door in the back. Another staff member ran to the table and pinched out 4 of the 10 candle flames. As they walked away, I noted the eliminated people's expressions. Some of them looked scared, almost as scared as Ian. Their eyes were wide and they seemed extremely reluctant to leave. Casper seemed more resigned than anything else, as if he was ready for whatever was going to happen next. Part of me wondered what was going on. Why did they all look so terrified? I didn't have time to think about it, because before I knew it, round 2 had begun. This time, the timer was shortened to 3 minutes. The round's title was Deal Breakers. I would have to discuss with the men the sorts of things that turned me off. Ian was first again. This time he looked absolutely mortified. Before he even sat down, I could tell that he was hyperventilating. He dropped into his seat and said,
Please help me.
"Are you okay?" I asked. He looked sick to his stomach.
Don't let them take me. I can't go back.
What is going on? It's all right, I said, even though I wasn't sure if it was. I was sure by now that Ian wasn't mentally stable. I also remembered that I wasn't required to take a background check when I accepted the job. Mr. Monroe recognized my discomfort and motioned to a group of crew members. They quickly ran on set and dragged him away, literally kicking and screaming. I was shaken, to say the least. I thought about the people I'd spoken to. They all seemed nervous, as if they had to be very careful with their words. I wondered where they had come from, or why they were here. And why were they all so afraid of being eliminated? Mr. Monroe gave me some sort of apology, telling me that Ian was having some sort of medical issue. I nodded, but deep down, I felt he was lying. I decided, however, for the time being not to think about it. I only had to keep going for a little while longer and then I could leave. The next man up was Mason. He sat down in the chair and I asked him what he would see as a deal breaker in a relationship. He began answering, but suddenly grabbed my arm and slammed it onto the table. I cried out in pain. The director called out and Mason immediately let go of my arm. Mr. Monroe beckoned for Mason to go over and talk to him. As Mason spoke with the director, I massaged my arm. It was as I brought it back up into my lap that I realized that I was holding something in my hand. I knew I hadn't been holding something before. I opened my fist and saw that I was clutching a piece of paper. I realized that Mason had managed to slip it into my hand as he grabbed my arm. On the scrap of paper was scrawled, "You shouldn't have come here. This is all a lie." I looked around. It didn't look like the shoot was a lie. There were a ton of crew members and expensive equipment. It looked like a stereotypical movie set. Maybe he meant I wouldn't get paid the promised amount, but how would he know that? Suddenly, I heard a sound beneath me. I looked down, but I didn't see anything. The sound must have come from beneath me. I heard it again. It sounded like a scream. I froze. My heart stopped. The scream sounded like Casper.
I'm leaving you off with a warning.
Mr. Monroe said to Mason.
Any more inappropriate behavior and you'll be down with Ian.
Mason nodded and sat back down across from me. He stared me in the eyes and I looked back. A silent understanding had passed between us for a moment, until I spoke again. "So Mason," I asked, keeping my eyes on him, "what would you say is a deal breaker for you in a relationship?"
Probably if she's too controlling. I want to be my own man.
We chatted for a couple more minutes before our time was up. As he prepared to go behind the curtain, he whispered to me again.
The eliminated are dead. The cameras aren't even on.
That's when it really sank in. The behavior of the contestants, the note from Mason. Something was very wrong here. I glanced over at the cameras and noticed that the light that is normally red when the camera is on was not visible. The next guy came out and I began conversing with him. I wasn't really focusing at this point. I just wanted to leave and go home and forget that this ever happened. I chatted with the next couple of guys, including Jonathan. Jonathan was my favorite out of all the contestants, but I couldn't stomach the idea that I would be eliminating anybody if the people I eliminated were actually killed. I wanted to believe that Mason was lying, but I could tell that he was dead serious when I talked to him. Eventually, the second round was over and it was time for elimination. This time, I only had to eliminate 3. Since Ian had been dragged out, that meant I would have to choose between 2 of them after the final round. Reluctantly, I chose the 3 guys I wanted to be removed. I felt awful. I couldn't look at them as they were ushered off set. I knew I had just doomed them to something unimaginable, but I had to choose someone. Just like the first round, someone ran out and snuffed out 4 candles, leaving only 2 lit. This left me with 2 suitors, Jonathan and Mason. The final round was called The Ideal Date. The first person up was Jonathan. I don't remember the full details of our conversation, just that he said his dream date was a picnic on the beach, watching the sunset and sipping a bottle of wine. I honestly didn't care. I just wanted to go home. I stammered some cookie-cutter dream date to him. Before long, he stood up and headed back to the curtain. He sighed as he did so and muttered something under his breath, but I couldn't tell if he was praying or trying to talk to me. I didn't bother listening. Finally, Mason came out. I could see the pure look of sadness on his face as we spoke. He said he would take me out to a nice restaurant and maybe a movie afterward. We both knew that it didn't matter. We knew what I would do, and there was no stopping it. Our time was up. Mr. Monroe called out from his chair.
So, who are you going out with?
I sighed. Jonathan. Everybody offset began to clap. As Mason was escorted away, he kept his head down with a look of utter resignation on his face. I couldn't bear to look at him as the door closed and he was brought away. That was it. It was over. I had killed 9 men for $5,000. Jonathan ran out. I could see the look of relief in his eyes as he thanked me over and over. The next couple of hours are a complete blur. I remember leaving the studio and driving back home. I remember collapsing on my couch and falling in and out of sleep for a day afterward. Now that I'm awake and alone, I've been trying to comprehend what I've experienced. There's not a shred of doubt in my mind that the eliminated men were killed. In fact, I'm certain that Mason was right about it all being a lie. I've tried finding the video they were supposedly filming of the speed date online, but I haven't found anything. Nor can I find the media company that I was working for. I've spent the last few days theorizing as to what was going on there. Nothing I've come up with makes any sense. However, one thing's for sure. I recently received a check in the mail from Mr. Nathan Monroe for $5,000. While reading a book in the small dining area of a cafe, I was approached by a man who seated himself across from me without asking, offering only a hello as an introduction before pulling the seat out and placing himself therein. He sat leaning forward with bold, unchecked eagerness, his butt no doubt hovering above the seat. I refrained from closing the book I'd been reading, fearing that he'd take it as me accepting his unspoken invitation to talk. He wasn't unattractive, having a decent enough face, and dressed well, but he was uninvited. I'd chosen a seat in the corner by the window specifically for the purpose of being outside the sphere of socialization, which always existed within the center of the cafe. There, the tables were more closely pressed, and many times groups would merge together in polite cohesion, talking and laughing and ordering drinks for the entire, initially unrelated party. He remarked on my book, and I, as politely as I could, gave him a few scant details about the narrative, adding, so as not to seem rude, that I'd barely read it, and therefore couldn't provide much beyond what I'd said. He nodded, gave a few shallow responses, and expressed an obvious insincere desire to check it out sometime, and then his attention quickly returned to me, specifically my face. I kept quiet, preparing to politely, though firmly, reject any requests for my number or to hang out again. Not because I had any immediate issues with this man, but because I hadn't gone out to the cafe with the desire to be hit on by strangers. But instead, in a gesture of immense line-crossing boldness, he reached across the table and picked up my cup of Earl Grey tea and took a sip from it. I was appalled, and only managed to respond with an almost whispered, "Excuse me?" No longer having the breath to speak aloud. He smiled, nodded approvingly at the tea, not at my meek reaction, and then without hesitation, picked up and bit into my gingerbread cookie, indelicately ruining the wreath of buttercream frosting and coating of orange sprinkles arranged into a smiling face. If the first incredibly unhygienic violation of my personal space had been bold, this latest offense was borderline insanity. Not only had the cookie cost a whopping $6.50, but it was good. And now, I thought hotly to myself, because of this man's social obscenity, I can no longer enjoy the rest. I'd only taken a single wonderful bite, but for the first time in years, I found myself fuming, glaring at him and summoning within my chest all the fury of someone who had not angrily, cathartically expressed themselves since middle school. I closed my book and imagined myself slamming it into the man's boyishly grinning face, knocking loose teeth and bloodying his nose, and perhaps even blackening one of his eyes. But instead, I leaned forward and said with the measured though fiery vitriol of someone on the very cusp of an outburst, "Leave my table right now, or I'm calling the police." In my head, I figured that skipping the middleman, the store's management, and going right to the authorities would sufficiently scare him. Instead, as if responding to some ordinary casually asked question, he leaned back, wiping his mouth with one of my already used napkins, sighed, and said, "Well, I'd love to meet them, but don't you think we should spend some time together tonight? Just the two of us?" Ugh! My jaw dropped, and the fury drained from me at the blatant dismissal, the implied challenge of my statement. I looked around more so to give myself time to think of a response than to see if there was anyone watching the upsetting interaction. And having thought of a response, I returned my attention to the man who had, in the interim, taken another bite of my cookie, now chewing thoughtfully while looking at nothing in particular. "Why are you doing this?" I knew it was probably the wrong thing to say. I knew that it was unwise to put myself in the position of the person asking the questions, effectively ceasing any conversational authority I might have had. But I wanted to know, and wagered that he'd provide an answer if I asked the question with as much dignity as I could manage, given the circumstances. Wiping his mouth again, there hadn't been any crumbs on his clean-shaven face either time, he leaned forward, looked directly in my eyes, and said, "Because I want to, Abby. Your friends can come tomorrow, or we can go there if you'd like. But tonight, I think we should just stay home. Relax in bed." I found myself laughing at this. Laughing unintentionally, uncontrollably, at the preposterousness of his words. My name isn't Abby, and the suggestion that he'd be so bold as to walk to the police station with me, the home of my friends, to turn himself in was so utterly ridiculous, a level of boldness unimaginable. I then suspected that he was actually crazy and had mistaken me for some friend and even considered forgiving his extreme rudeness. But then, as if to deprive himself of any potential impunity, he reached down, plucked my purse from the spot where I'd set it beside my chair, and after rifling through its contents, removed my car keys. "I'll drive. I've been wanting to pass by the Ellisons' house and see how their deck is going. Don't worry, I won't actually stop. Just want to see if I can gloat to Ted later at the barber shop about finishing ours first. You know how he's always going on about his amazing carpentry skills." My name isn't Abby, and I don't know any Ted or any other members of an Ellison family either. I watched, now openly, deeply unsettled, as this complete stranger twirled my keys around his finger. "He has your keys. Oh my gosh, he has your keys, Samantha. Get away, get away, get away." My inner voice screamed at me. The world around me seemed to condense into a single space, one in which I was now at the complete automotive mercy of some random, terrifyingly audacious stranger. I decided then to drop all pretenses of social grace, to discard all notions of redemption, and prepare to shout for the entire cafe to hear that he should give me back my keys and leave me alone. But just as I was about to stand and really give it to him, he put his hand on mine, leaned forward, close enough for me to smell the scents of my cookie and tea, and said, "Front right corner, blue jacket, single cup of coffee on the table. Hasn't taken a sip in the last 10 minutes. Phone leaning against the cup, the camera facing here. Has been positioned that way since you sat down, before I came over." My eyes remained locked on the man for just a moment as my brain struggled to momentarily ignore the physical violation of the man's hand, and then, pretending to scratch my leg, I turned to the side and glanced in the direction indicated, and saw, just as the man had described, the other man, sitting with his head in his hands, ostensibly staring ahead in boredom, while his phone sat leaning against his coffee cup, the camera aimed in the direction of my table. I convincingly scratched at my leg, and then turned to face the man in front of me, and smiled. A genuine smile of gratitude. He raised his eyebrows in acknowledgement and then leaned back, respectfully removing his hand from mine and letting my keys rest on the table between us. We sat there for a moment, both speaking loudly enough for the other patron to hear, carrying on the role play of our pretend life together. Eventually, that other man stood up, theatrically stretched and yawned, and grabbed his phone. My husband, standing at the same time, politely excused himself from the table and walked over to the other man. I watched, amazed, as he exhibited yet another moment of charismatic boldness, taking the man's phone from his hands and examining it without permission. My pretend husband checked the man's protest with an incontestably raised finger and proceeded to probe the contents of the commandeered phone, his finger flicking through menus and images while his expression grew increasingly grave. Once he found what he'd been looking for, he pointed an accusatory finger at the man, who shrunk back as if struck, and then walking back to my table, my husband held the man's phone out to me. I took it and found a video opened on the screen, its duration nearly 14 minutes long. The video showed me sitting by myself, gazing out the cafe's front window. 14 minutes focused on my table, on my body. 14 minutes of creepily recorded footage. Sickened and yet darkly curious, I swiped through the rest of the videos and felt my stomach turn as I found more. Not only more videos of myself, from several previous visits to the cafe, but of other women as well. The entire collection of stealthily recorded footage from various angles in the cafe and other restaurants of the area, some of the more quirkily embellished interiors immediately recognized despite the occasionally awkward angles. He was a serial offender. Had taken, according to the gallery's information, 16 gigabytes of video in the last few months. All of women who'd been entirely oblivious to his digital violations. When I found the videos of the man walking behind women on sideways and in alleyways, I pushed the phone back to my pretend husband's hands and turned away so that my repulsion would not be seen by the deviant, in case he got off to that kind of thing. We of course called the police, keeping the man hemmed in with the help of the cafe staff, who had until that point thought of the man as a loyal and pleasant patron. I wanted to delete the videos of myself from the man's phone, but my pretend husband advised me not to, saying it was very important evidence and could be used to my significant benefit in court. I agreed, and when the police arrived, we handed over the phone with all its deplorable content left undisturbed. Relieved, though also emotionally exhausted, I planned to return home and sleep or make myself some coffee and try to take my mind off the ordeal with a long night of reading. But before I could gather my things, my pretend husband asked if he could repay me for my misappropriated tea and cookie. Sorely missing the taste of both, I graciously accepted, but the staff, perhaps fearing that I'd somehow blame them for the pervert's behavior, offered us whatever we wanted, free of charge. I repeated my earlier order, and the man ordered himself a coffee and a slice of lemon cake, commenting afterwards, "I really hated that gingerbread cookie." I thanked him for his stoic tolerance of it and his endeavor to keep up the charade, and we laughed together. Well, since I haven't actually repaid you, how about I treat us to dinner later? We'll of course have something delivered, since we're staying in tonight, right? Unable to speak through a mouthful of deliciously spiced and generously frosted cookie, I smiled and slid my car keys into his hands.